Welcome to the deep dive. We're really thrilled to have you with us today.
We definitely are.
For this deep dive, we're pulling from a pretty massive stack of sources. We've got a really comprehensive Wikipedia article, some historical accounts, and, our own notes to explore the life and the undeniable aura of a man who completely blurred the lines between scripted entertainment and unscripted chaos.
Oh, absolutely blurred them.
Yeah. We're talking about professional wrestling legend Sidney Raymond Udy. You probably know him as Sid Justice, Psycho Sid, or perhaps most famously, Sid Vicious.
A name that just commands attention.
Right. And our mission today is to figure out the psychology of a man who was so incredibly compelling that audiences routinely cheered for him when they were explicitly supposed to boo. And we really want to understand the intense physical and backstage realities of the 1990s wrestling boom.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, Sid's career is a fascinating case study in audience psychology. It shows us how sheer physical presence and absolute unpredictability can completely override carefully laid corporate plans.
Because he definitely wasn't playing by the corporate rules.
No, not at all. He wasn't just a wrestler executing moves. He was a masterclass in character aura. He inhabited this space that constantly made fans question what was real and what was part of the show, which, was a very rare skill in that era.
And to really understand that aura, we have to look at the raw physical stats first. Udy was an absolute mountain of a man.
A giant.
6'9", 317 pounds of pure intimidation. But my favorite detail, the thing that immediately sets the tone for his whole vibe, is his build hometown.
Oh, this is the best part.
Right. He wasn't announced as being from New York or Los Angeles or even parts unknown like so many others. When he walked down the aisle, he was billed as being from, quote, wherever he damn well pleases.
Which immediately establishes a psychological dominance over the arena. It tells the audience, without him having to speak a single word, that this is a man who simply cannot be controlled by the referee, by the promotion, or even by the unwritten rules of the sport.
So how does a guy like this even find his way into the business? I know he had a chance encounter early on with Randy Savage and his brother Lanny Poffo, but what did those early days actually look like?
Well, it started with him training under Tojo Yamamoto, and he actually made his debut back in 1987 wearing a mask.
A mask?
Yeah, he was wrestling in the Continental Championship Wrestling promotion under the name Lord Humongous.
Wow.
But wearing a mask when you have that kind of expressive, intense face is almost a disservice. So he eventually dropped it and adopted the ring name Sid Vicious, and he borrowed that name directly from the punk rock bass player of the Sex Pistols.
I always found that crossover so funny. A 300-pound southern behemoth naming himself after a skinny British punk rocker.
What's fascinating here is the subconscious signaling of that name choice. By adopting a punk rock moniker, he was instantly telling the audience that he was anti-establishment.
Oh, that makes a lot of sense.
Right. The original Sid Vicious was famous for anarchy, rebellion, and just a complete disregard for the rules. When Udy took that name, he carried that exact same chaotic, anti-authority energy right into the wrestling ring. It perfectly set the tone for his entire career and really explains so much of the crowd appeal he would eventually harness.
So by 1989, he signs with WCW, keeping that Sid Vicious name. He gets paired up with Dan Spivey to form a tag team called the Skyscrapers.
A very fitting name.
Extremely fitting.
Yeah.
And then a year later, in 1990, he joins the legendary Four Horsemen stable alongside Ric Flair, Arn Anderson, and Barry Windham. But the reason they brought him in is just pure 1990s wrestling absurdity.
It really is.
They needed the muscle to counter a literal movie character. They brought him in to fight RoboCop.
It perfectly encapsulates the era, doesn't it? You have traditional grounded wrestling talent like the Four Horsemen needing a countermeasure for a comic book style gimmick cross-promotion like RoboCop. And the only believable answer the bookers could come up with was a 317-pound man named Sid Vicious.
It's the kind of thing you just can't make up. But being the muscle against a cyborg wasn't his peak. That brings us to 1991, and he makes the jump to the WWF.
The big leagues?
Exactly. They change his name to Sid Justice. And here's where it gets really interesting. We need to talk about the 1992 Royal Rumble.
Oh, absolutely.
This is a pivotal moment in wrestling history. We are down to the final four in the Rumble match. It's Randy Savage, Ric Flair, Sid, and Hulk Hogan.
And at this point in time, Hulk Hogan was the undeniable face of the company. He was the hero everyone was conditioned to unconditionally love for the better part of a decade.
Right. The script is written for Hogan to be the beloved icon. But Sid eliminates Savage, and then he casually eliminates Hulk Hogan. Now, according to the traditional wrestling playbook, the crowd is supposed to be furious.
They are supposed to riot.
They were supposed to boo Sid out of the building for tossing out their hero, but they don't. The crowd erupts. They cheer Sid wildly. Hogan is furious, acting like a sore loser, and he grabs Sid's arm from the outside, pulling him over the top rope, which allows Ric Flair to sneak up, throw Sid out, and win the championship.
The psychology of the audience in that specific moment is incredibly telling. The fans were starting to actively reject the traditional white meat hero that Hogan represented.
He was just getting old for them.
Exactly. It felt stale. Think about the broader culture in 1992. Grunge music is taking over. Anti-establishment sentiment is rising in mainstream media. And people are getting cynical about polished corporate heroes. They didn't want the guy telling them to say their prayers and take their vitamins anymore. They wanted the gritty, unapologetic rebel. It was a massive cultural shift happening in real time right there in the arena.
And the fallout was immediate. Sid turns full heel. He main events WrestleMania 8 against Hulk Hogan, which ends in a disqualification when Sid's manager, Harvey Whippleman, and Papa Shango interfere. But shortly after that massive WrestleMania main event, Sid just abruptly quits the company.
Just walks away.
He was slated to feud with the Ultimate Warrior next, but Yudy walked out because the WWF wanted the Ultimate Warrior to kick out of his finishing maneuver, the powerbomb. He felt that having someone simply kick out of it ruined the move's credibility.
Walking away from a top-tier spot in the biggest wrestling company in the world is almost unheard of.
But wait, I have to play devil's advocate here.
Yeah.
Isn't wrestling at its core a cooperative business? You go out there, you perform the script you were given, and you make your opponent look good. Wasn't it incredibly unprofessional for him to just pack up and quit simply because he didn't want his move to look weak?
From a corporate standpoint, absolutely. It's sheer defiance. But from the perspective of a performer managing their own intellectual property, it's actually a masterstroke of brand protection. Well, Yudy recognized early on that his entire value as an earner lay in his aura of invincibility. The powerbomb wasn't just a move, it was the definitive period at the end of his sentence. If the Ultimate Warrior kicks out of it, the illusion shatters. Sid suddenly becomes just another guy in trunks who can be beaten. He was willing to walk away from millions of dollars in the short term, rather than compromise the core identity and lethality of his character, which he knew would sustain him for decades.
That makes a lot of sense when you frame it as protecting his long-term investment in himself. There were also other factors, like his frustration with declining house show gates eating into his pay, and some disputed claims from the WWF about him refusing drug tests, which Yudy always denied.
Right, there were definitely layers to the exit.
But protecting the character was clearly paramount. You'd think walking away from the main event of WrestleMania would be the most shocking thing he could do. But his return to WCW proved that the real chaos wasn't always happening in the ring. It was happening in the hotel bars. Okay, let's unpack this next chapter. It's 1993, he's back in WCW as Sid Vicious, and he is slated to win the World Heavyweight Championship at Starrcade.
Which sets the stage for one of the most infamous cautionary tales in the history of the business.
They are on a grueling European tour. After a show, the locker room is hanging out at a hotel bar in Blackburn, England. What actually went down that night?
It was a perfect storm of exhaustion, alcohol, and professional tension. Sid was at the bar making disparaging remarks about Ric Flair. Arn Anderson, who was sitting nearby and is one of Flair's closest real-life friends, took offense.
Naturally.
A heated argument breaks out. Arn ends up throwing a beer in Sid's face and threatens him with a broken glass mug. At that point, security and other wrestlers manage to break it up and send everyone back to their respective hotel rooms. The situation should have ended there.
But Yudy doesn't let it go.
No, an enraged Yudy stews on it, leaves his room, goes down the hall to Arn's room, and attacks him with a wooden chair leg he had broken off. Arn, defending himself, retaliates with a pair of scissors.
It's just terrifying.
The reality of this fight is extraordinarily grisly. Sid received 4 stab wounds in the struggle. Arn Anderson received 20 stab wounds and lost 1.5 pints of blood. If it wasn't for another wrestler, Too Cold Scorpio, stepping in to physically break it up, the outcome could have been fatal. Scorpio is widely credited with saving Arn's life that night.
It's hard to even wrap your head around that happening on a work trip. Miraculously, both men survived and fully recovered. And the strangest footnote to all of this is that the British Crown Prosecution Service declined to press criminal charges.
Because they were leaving.
Exactly, because both men were Americans leaving the country shortly anyway. The authorities essentially washed their hands of this situation.
This raises an important question for you as the listener to consider about the environment these athletes existed in during that era. How does the high pressure, incredibly physical environment of touring constantly on the road, performing violently every single night for months on end, blur the lines of real world aggression? These performers were in a pressure cooker with very little oversight, and sometimes the adrenaline of the ring spilled directly into the hallways.
And the professional consequence for Sid was massive. He was fired immediately. He lost his guaranteed world title run at Starrcade. Everything he had built up for this massive return vanished in a single night of real-world violence.
It's a stark reminder that while the outcomes of the matches are predetermined, the volatility of the men performing them was very, very real.
So Sid disappears from the national spotlight for a bit. He spends some time in the USWA, feuding with Jerry Lawler and winning their unified World Heavyweight Championship twice. But in 1995, he makes his return to the WWF. This time, the promotion dubs him Psycho Sid, spelled S-Y-C-H-O.
This iteration of the character was fascinating because he leaned so heavily into erratic, unstable mannerisms. He wasn't just a physical monster anymore, he was psychologically intimidating.
He had those crazy eyes.
Yes, he would do these long, contemplative stares into the distance, excessive eye blinking, and he had this chilling habit of suddenly turning a wide, manic laugh into a dead serious, threatening glare.
He initially comes in as Shawn Michaels' bodyguard. He eventually turns on Michaels, naturally powerbombing him 3 times in a row. He joins Ted DiBiase's $1 million corporation. Fast forward to the 1996 Survivor Series pay-per-view. Sid is challenging Shawn Michaels for the WWF Championship in Madison Square Garden. And we see another massive instance of the crowd completely rebelling against the script. How did the audience react to what was supposed to be a deeply villainous moment?
It's the ultimate irony of his career. During the climax of the match, Sid grabs a heavy television camera from a ringside operator. Shawn Michaels' elderly manager, Jose Lothario, gets up on the ring apron to try and stop him. Sid refuses to put the camera down and literally strikes this elderly man in the chest with it.
Just brutal.
Hitting a defenseless older man is, by every metric of traditional storytelling, the ultimate villainous act. It is designed specifically to make the audience despise the bad guy.
But the audience loved it. They cheered wildly for Sid and booed the hero, Shawn Michaels. Sid ends up hitting Michaels with the camera while the referee is distracted, throwing him in the ring, hitting the powerbomb, and winning the WWF Championship.
Yeah.
And the building just exploded with joy. He would later win the championship a second time by beating Bret Hart.
It shows that by late 1996, the audience's desire for chaos and anti-heroes had completely solidified. They didn't care about the moral alignment of the character. They didn't care if he was breaking the rules or attacking managers. They just loved the sheer destruction Sid brought to the ring. The fans were deciding who the stars were, regardless of what the bookers wrote on the format sheet.
But the wrestling business takes a toll. And after some time off for a neck injury and a brief stint in ECW, we enter the final major chapter of his mainstream television career. It's 1999, and Sid returns to WCW. He is now calling himself the Millennium Man. He goes on this massive winning streak, but not in the traditional way a wrestler usually builds a streak.
No, his streak was hilariously padded. He would just walk down to the ring during other people's matches, hit them with a powerbomb, leave, and then claim on the microphone that it counted as a victory for his streak. It was wonderfully absurd and completely fit the chaotic nature of WCW at the time.
It led to a massive feud with Goldberg, including a match at Halloween Havoc, where they were actually fighting backstage before the bell rang. Sid needed stitches, but he refused them. So he wrestled the entire match bleeding openly and heavily, eventually losing due to excessive blood loss.
He always brought that visceral intensity.
He bounced back, though, and in the year 2000, he finally reached the mountaintop in WCW, beating Kevin Nash to win the WCW World Heavyweight Championship.
And then we reached the Sin pay-per-view in January 2001. This is a moment that forever altered his life, and it highlights a very dark, often unspoken side of the entertainment business.
It's a four corners match for the title against Scott Steiner, Jeff Jarrett, and Road Warrior Animal. But the real story is what happened behind the scenes. WCW executive John Laurinaitis allegedly pressured Yuti to broaden his moveset for the match. He suggested Sid try an aerial maneuver, jumping off the top or middle rope.
Which is a huge ass.
Sid objected strongly. He was a 300-plus pound man with a history of injuries. He didn't believe a wrestler of his shape and size should be doing high-flying moves.
The pressure on performers to risk their bodies for a pop from the crowd or to appease management is immense in this industry. When your livelihood, your spot on the card, and your contract negotiations depend on management viewing you as a team player, saying no to an executive is incredibly difficult, even for a veteran like Sid.
So, feeling the pressure, Sid goes through with it. He jumps from the second turnbuckle, attempting a big boot on Scott Steiner, and he lands with all his massive weight awkwardly on his left foot while kicking with his right. The result was absolutely horrific.
Just devastating to watch.
The tibia and fibula snapped completely in half. At least one of the bones broke through the skin, and his foot rotated 90 degrees counterclockwise. It was so graphic and unsettling that television networks literally refused to replay the footage.
He suffered a double compound fracture. The aftermath required a grueling 2-hour surgery where doctors placed a 17-inch rod in his leg. He later sued WCW over the incident, claiming he was coerced into performing the jump against his explicit medical objections, though he ultimately lost that lawsuit. It's a tragic example of corporate demands physically breaking the talent.
It put him out of action indefinitely, and doctors told Yudi the grim reality. They told him he would never be able to run again.
But this is where the man behind the monster really shines through. Yudi set a stubborn, almost impossible goal for himself. He didn't just want to be able to walk comfortably, he specifically wanted to run. He viewed running as even more important than weightlifting or his general physique.
He attacked his rehab with the same terrifying intensity he brought to the ring. He was doing physical therapy 3 to 5 days a week for over a year. At first, he could only get around using a cane, but through sheer, grueling, painful effort, he defied the medical experts. He walked. Then he ran.
It's incredible.
And against all odds, he actually returned to active wrestling on the independent circuit, performing from 2004 all the way to 2017.
It speaks volumes about his willpower. The character of Sid Vicious was an unstoppable, unfeeling monster, but Sidney Yudi, the man, possessed a very real, very human resilience.
And when you dig into his life outside the ring, there are so many quirky, deeply human elements to him. For instance, he absolutely loved softball. He was notorious for playing in softball leagues during his time off in the late 90s, sometimes supposedly even prioritizing it over wrestling dates.
That's dedication to the game.
He had a brief run-in with the law in 2011. He was pulled over for not wearing a seatbelt, which led to minor charges for misdemeanor marijuana possession and driving without a license. He even starred in a few indie horror movies like River of Darkness and Death from Above, acting alongside other wrestlers. And in 2012, he appeared on the CBS reality show Big Brother simply because his son, Frank, was a contestant.
It shows a totally different side to him. Seeing this terrifying wrestling villain acting as a dedicated, nervous father supporting his son on national television is so far removed from the psycho Sid persona we've been discussing.
Sadly, Yugi passed away on August 26, 2024, at the age of 63. He had been battling cancer, specifically non-Hodgkin's lymphoma, while also dealing with congestive heart failure. But his impact on the business was immediately clear. That very night on WWE Live television, superstar Damian Priest paid tribute to him by performing Sid's trademark chokeslam and powerbomb in the middle of a match. So what does this all mean?
It means his legacy is permanently etched into the industry. You cannot tell the story of 1990s professional wrestling without talking about the impact of Sid.
We've just tracked the journey of a man whose physical presence was so massive, so undeniable, that he could alter the trajectory of the entire wrestling industry. A man who survived a brutal, real-life backstage stabbing, who walked away from the main event of WrestleMania to protect his brand, and who overcame a gruesome, nationally televised injury that was supposed to end his mobility forever, all just to prove to himself and the doctors that he could run again.
And as we wrap up today, I want to leave you with a final thought to mull over. Think about the times in your own life or career when you've encountered someone who simply refused to conform to the script they were handed. We often say we want heroes who play by the rules, who do exactly what they are told, but Sid's career proves that we are magnetically drawn to the chaos of those who don't. Are we cheering for the villain, or are we really just cheering for the freedom of a man who lives and works wherever he damn well pleases?
That is a fascinating question to chew on. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive. We'll catch you next time.